The best way to get better at programming is to practice. In this example, we'll be looking at just how to create a couple of different types of arrays. As always, this file is available for download using a link provided below in the description. We'll pause for just a couple of seconds, and then you can follow along once you have the file. Alright, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is just create an array of numbers. We're not going to initialize it with values, we're just going to declare it. And to declare it, all we have to do is say something like int, that's the type of data I'm going to store. We'll call it a list, my list, okay? This could be any variable name just like before. Then I'm going to put a square bracket and the size or number of elements inside my array. So this would hold 5 integers. An array in C++ must be of all the same data type, so that has to be all ints, all floats, all strings, etc. And if I'm declaring it without initializing some values, this is a way I can do it. One other thing that's a little bit different if you're coming from a language like Python or JavaScript is that an array in C and C++ cannot grow over time. It is fixed in size. So not only is it fixed in our data type, it is also fixed in our size. This, however, does make working with arrays in C and C++ much faster and more efficient. Now, what happens if you had some default values? And this could be of strings or ints or anything else. The way you solve it is exactly the same way. In this case, I'm going to say it's a list of strings. I'm going to call this names. You'll often find that when I'm naming a variable that's an array, I'll often give it a plural name to give it a hint to myself that, hey, there's more than one value here. Or, like I did with my list, I use a name that infers that there's a group of values. So once again, I'm going to use an open and close square bracket, but instead of giving it a number for names I'm going to give it, I'm going to say equals and then put some braces. What am I going to put in the braces? Well, I'm going to give it some strings. So I will say, for example, Mike, comma, Jeff, comma, Joe. Each element is in its own separate string separated by commas. Notice I have 3 sets of double quotes, one for each name, and commas in between them. This creates for me an array that has 3 elements in it. Now, if I give it something like attendees and 10 elements, I can come over here and still give it some values. Now, what happens if I don't give it as many values as spaces I provided? Well, that means the remaining ones will be empty. So in this case, I will have 7 empty strings and 3 with values. So I've started off my attendees list, but I haven't finished it. So these are 3 different ways of creating an array. To define the size, but not give it any values. That's just declaring without initializing. To not give it a size, but initialize the value, which is going to tell it how big it needs to be. Or I can tell it how big it needs to be and then give some or all values of that array. The only thing I want to be careful of is not to give it too many. If you do that, declaring your array will be pretty easy. If this video was helpful, please consider giving it a like and look at other videos inside this series to learn how to get better at programming in C and C++.